Step out of the vehicle, sir. Marcus Williams gripped the steering wheel tightly, letting out a deep sigh. This wasn't the first time he found himself in this situation, and it likely wouldn't be the last. The road stretched ahead, quiet and empty, while the blue lights from the patrol car behind him flashed in the rearview mirror. Two officers approached, hands resting on their belts as if ready for action. They had no idea who Marcus was. He wasn't just another driver on a back road at night. He was their new supervisor. Tonight, they were about to realize that in the most unexpected way. "License and registration, please," demanded Officer Hawthorne, his voice curt and authoritative. There was no courtesy in his tone, just a flat command. His younger partner, Officer Ramirez, stood nearby, observing Marcus with suspicion. Without a word, Marcus handed over the documents. Hawthorne grabbed them without even making eye contact and walked back to the cruiser. Marcus watched through the side mirror as the two officers huddled together, discussing something while examining his papers. Marcus felt a surge of frustration rise within him, but kept his expression neutral. It was far from his first encounter with prejudice and bias. As a black man in law enforcement, he'd fought hard for every inch of respect. From his childhood in a disadvantaged neighborhood, where the police were more feared than trusted, to his rise through the ranks, Marcus had faced more obstacles than most. Joining the force was his way of confronting the system from within. But now, even as the newly appointed captain of this precinct, some things hadn't changed. "Sir, step out of the vehicle," Officer Hawthorne ordered again, this time with more force as he returned to the window. Marcus raised an eyebrow, but complied, stepping out of the car slowly. He knew this routine all too well. "Is there a problem?" he asked, keeping his tone level but firm. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," Hawthorne said, eyes scanning Marcus up and down. "We need to search your vehicle." "Suspicious activity? What exactly do I have to do with that?" Marcus asked calmly. Hawthorne's gaze flickered with impatience. "You match the description. Now, put your hands on the hood, sir. We're not asking again." Marcus stood his ground, though his mind raced. He knew this was an abuse of power. He'd seen it happen to others too many times. But before he could respond, Hawthorne grabbed his arm and shoved him against the hood. The cold steel of the handcuffs snapped around Marcus's wrists. "You're making a serious mistake," Marcus warned, his voice low but steady. The sound of another vehicle approaching broke the tense silence. A second patrol car pulled up, and two more officers stepped out. One of them, Sergeant Kelly, immediately recognized Marcus. His face paled as he took in the sight of his new captain being cuffed against the hood of his own car. "What the hell is going on here?" Kelly demanded, striding over to Hawthorne. "Routine stop, sir," Hawthorne replied, his arrogance faltering. Kelly's eyes darted from Marcus to Hawthorne. "Do you know who this is?" Kelly barked, his voice sharp with disbelief. Hawthorne blinked, confused. "He fits the description. Take those cuffs off. Now!" Kelly interrupted, not allowing him to finish. Hawthorne fumbled with the keys, his face pale as he unlocked the handcuffs. Marcus flexed his wrists, stepping away from the car, his expression unreadable, but his eyes simmering with controlled anger. "You've just handcuffed your new captain," Kelly said, his voice seething with barely contained rage. Marcus didn't need to say a word. The officers were already panicking, their faces drained of color as the weight of their mistakes sank in. The next morning, tension hung thick in the precinct. Word of the incident spread quickly, and whispers followed Marcus as he entered the station. Hawthorne and Ramirez were already waiting outside his office, their faces etched with worry. They knew this wasn't going to end well. Marcus sat behind his desk, his fingers steepled as the officers entered. Hawthorne's usual bravado was gone, replaced by a palpable fear. Ramirez looked even worse, visibly shaken. "You understand what happened last night, don't you?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but laced with authority. "It was just protocol," Hawthorne stammered, unable to meet Marcus's gaze. "Protocol?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Do you really believe profiling someone based on their appearance is following protocols?" Hawthorne shifted uncomfortably, while Ramirez remained silent, too afraid to speak. "You targeted me because of who I am, not because of what I did," Marcus continued, his voice colder now. "You violated my rights, and more importantly, you demonstrated the exact kind of bias this department can no longer afford to tolerate." Hawthorne's face drained of color as Marcus's words sank in. "You're both suspended effective immediately," Marcus said, his tone final. "There will be an internal review of your conduct, and depending on the findings, you may not wear this badge again." Hawthorne opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Ramirez simply stared at the floor, visibly shaken by the consequences of their actions. As the two officers left his office, Marcus remained seated, staring at the wall where photos of former captains lined the room. The faces that stared back at him were all too familiar. Men who had overlooked the deep-seated problems within the force. Men who had let things slide for far too long. But Marcus was different. He wasn't here to maintain the status quo. He was here to change it. In that moment, he knew that last night's encounter wasn't just a personal victory for him. It was a message to every officer in the precinct. Things were changing, and from now on, they would all be held accountable. Marcus Williams wasn't just any captain. He was a symbol of what the future of law enforcement needed to be: fair, just, and free from prejudice. As Marcus sat back in his chair, the quiet of the office settling around him, the weight of the night's events began to lift, though not completely. What happened on that dark, empty road wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a reflection of the deeper issues that plagued not only this precinct but law enforcement as a whole. The way Officer Hawthorne and Ramirez had treated him was a stark reminder that prejudice, no matter how far he'd come or how much authority he'd earned, was still alive and well. But this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The precinct had fallen silent, but Marcus knew the real work was just beginning. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but last night was a small victory. By holding the officers accountable for their actions, Marcus sent a message to the entire department. No one, not even the people in uniform, was above the law. The badge they wore wasn't a license for unchecked authority. It was a responsibility, one that came with the highest expectations of fairness, justice, and humanity. As he reflected on the events, Marcus realized that this wasn't just a personal battle. It was a much larger fight. The struggles he had faced throughout his career weren't unique to him. They were shared by so many people, both inside and outside the system. From his youth in a neighborhood where police were feared, to his climb through a profession filled with silent and blatant biases, Marcus had witnessed the deep divide between communities and law enforcement. His journey wasn't just about his success or survival. It was about bridging that divide, healing the wounds of the past, and building a future where the law protected everyone equally. And that was the real victory he sought. The officers in his precinct would now be forced to confront their own biases, just as Hawthorne and Ramirez had. They would learn that every decision they made would be scrutinized, not by Marcus alone, but by a community that expected better, a community that deserved better. The moral of Marcus's story is one of resilience and the importance of accountability. Marcus didn't let the prejudices of others define him, and he refused to let them control his destiny. Despite the barriers placed in his path, he kept pushing forward, knowing that real change would only come through persistence. His journey is a testament to the idea that justice is not something given, it's something fought for. And that fight requires unwavering commitment to doing what's right, even when it's uncomfortable or difficult. For the officers under Marcus's command, the lesson was clear. Power is not a tool for oppression or control. It's a responsibility to protect, to serve, and to uphold the rights of every individual. Respect for the law means respecting the people it governs, regardless of their background, appearance, or status. Those who wear the badge must understand that they are part of something greater than themselves, a system meant to safeguard the principles of fairness and equality. As Marcus looked out the window, watching the sun rise over the city, he knew that this was only the beginning of his mission. He wasn't just here to maintain order. He was here to ensure that the officers in his department and beyond would uphold the true meaning of justice for everyone.